turn my phone off, Mark?
And I'll read. David will.
I call this workshop of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this workshop has been duly called and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. I would like to welcome everybody here today and note that we'll have one board member that Ms. Waller is not going to be with us. Mr. Stasny will be here but is running late. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Find my agenda. At this time, do we have any citizens' comments? No. Okay. So we will go straight down into information items. Item 1 is return to learn.
Good afternoon. Yes, thank you for having us back for another update for Return to Learn. I just wanted to keep the board informed about the progress thus far and some of the things that are in place to help make sure our schools are open and safe for students and for staff. So you might recognize that we still are publishing our Return to Learn plan on, so sorry, awkwardly clicking. No? No?
So you click and then Matt does something?
He's on. Yeah. There we go. Look at that. Naturally move to the next slide. We do continually provide updates to this plan as new information becomes available to us. For example, there's some new information that came from TEA since the last time we spoke with the board. All of that has been updated and included in the Return to Learn plan that is published on our website. And much of that's what we're going to be covering today, along with some additional information. So first, we'll send it over to Dr. Merrill.
Here we go, make sure that technology is working. This is something that we brought to you last time as well, and this is the dashboard. You'll be able to see what we're tracking as well as just a graph over to the right. And it shows the staff positivity rate as well as the student positivity rate. And parents are able to obviously find this on the website and see their campus and identify on top of the emails that we are sending out. So.
Brian, on that slide, there is not a date to show us that that's current up to a time. On the website, does it show that it's up to date as of today or as of Friday?
It does.
It gives the time it was updated as well, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. And so I mentioned just briefly a second ago, if you go to the next slide, Matthew, you'll talk about the transparent communication that is timely and accurate. We are sending out emails to the parents to make sure that they're aware that there has been a positive case. We did that from, honestly, the very, very beginning. That was something we felt was really important to make sure that our parents had the necessary information so that they could make their own informed decisions. And so on top of the COVID dashboard, we have the communication that's sent out, daily. Let's talk just a second about masks. Obviously, this is a hot button item, and masks are strongly encouraged. Dr. Hvac has really started the year with that, being communicated out to the principals as well as the students. Masks are optional inside the Bryan ISD buildings, but they are strongly encouraged across in every situation that we can. And in addition, the campuses have masks available. So sitting in classrooms, we put them in boxes. They're sitting at the front desk. They're really anywhere and everywhere that we can find them to put them to make them available to the students and to the visitors. So the student comes off the bus, we've got them in the cafeteria. I can think of a few examples specifically right in the front of office when kids come in, parents come in, we make them available. So they're there, and it's obviously the student's choice whether or not they put them on, the staff's choice, but it's not because of the lack of availability. They are definitely available. So we do have some students that have they've made that personal decision. They're walking around with them, they're putting them on, which we appreciate. So we're making them available where appropriate.
Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, on the bus, they're still required to have them on the bus?
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, we do. We do. They're required to ride the bus. And that's been consistent from the beginning of this entire situation. So the mass in the building has obviously changed, but the mass on the buses has not. Now, I can tell you that when a student comes in from the bus, we have them available for those that are even in the cafeteria. So we have them at almost every right turn. They're available. We put them in the boxes of the secondary campuses as well for the teachers to be able to use in the classrooms.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill. Good afternoon. Regarding the vaccinations, we just want to update the board and the community to remind everyone that we still have multiple entities throughout the community that are offering vaccines at no charge. You can find them at the pharmacies, the health district, just all, many different options there. But new and different today, we're pleased to report that we partnered with HealthPoint to offer vaccinations for Bryan ISD employees and actually students over 12. This is an entity that's located near MC Harris, and we are open every day from 7 to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. So again, it opened last week. We don't have numbers to quantify the number of staff members taking advantage of it. And also new is we're working on a partnership to possibly offer vaccination clinics for our students, again, ages 12 or older, with parents present. We haven't launched this yet, but we're hoping to do something like this for the weekend, again, offering it for our students.
Also sharing a microphone, thank you. So just a quick recap of the COVID protocols and what do you do if you're positive. There were some changes from TEA, and I'll get to that in just a few moments. But first and foremost, if a student or a staff member is positive, they are required to quarantine from the first date of symptoms and then 10 additional days beyond that. To return to campus and to be back at school or at work, you must have had at least 24 hours since you've had a fever. You have to have an improvement in symptoms, and you have to have waited that 10-day period. The difference here for athletes and for UIL participants is that you must also produce a physician's note for returning to participation in those activities. So in general, we want to make sure that our students and our staff all are real clear. What do you do if you're positive? We need to know. And so there is a dedicated email account for each campus, and it's on the Return to Learn plan where you can email your information, your child's information, their testing results, and then the school personnel will work with you on the return date for your child. If a student is not positive but is suspected to have COVID, meaning you have multiple symptoms that may indicate that you have COVID, whether it's staff or student, we do ask that you quarantine. However, if you're able to produce a doctor's note showing an alternative diagnosis, we don't need to know what the diagnosis is, just that the doctor's authorizing you to return to school, or a negative rapid test, you may return to school and or work as long as the other symptoms have also improved. New and different has to do with how we handle close contacts. This has been a little bit of a confusion point since TEA released the new guidance, the new public health guidance, and they've since sent out additional information and new information. So students, it's still the same. If a student is close contact, it is the parent's choice to quarantine or not to quarantine based on the student's symptoms, and if the student is symptom-free and they haven't been around the close contact, the parent has that choice. For employees, that was the case. However, TEA came out with new and different information that employees who report they are close contact, meaning the health department or the employee knows they were a close contact and comes forward and tells you, they must agree to provide a rapid test in order to return to work. Now, initially, TEA said this was to be done every other day, and about a week later, they changed the wording to periodically and gave very little guidance on what that frequency might look like. And so, yes, it's very helpful. So what we worked on as a team is that if an employee reports they're a close contact, they must go and get rapid tested in order to remain at work that day or prior to coming to work that first day. And then every 3 days thereafter until the end of the 10-day time period. And again, that's since the date of last exposure to the person who was positive, the last point of close contact. So we are thankful, as Ms. Carabine mentioned earlier, that we have partnered with HealthPoint through Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Besaw's work. We now have an agreement in place where our employees can go between the hours of 7 and 10 a.m. and they can drive up and be rapid tested if they're a close contact, and they can even stay in their car, get their test result, and then come to work following that moment.
Can I get a clarification on the
Certainly.
slide before? I wanted to go forward and make sure that it wasn't addressed here.
Yes, ma'am.
Apparently, there was an email that went out from a sister district that emphasized that children who missed due to quarantining or positive COVID would be counted absent. And then in the next paragraph, it said that students must complete 90% of their attendance days in order to get credit. And I wanted to be sure that my understanding is that you will be counted absent because that is average daily attendance and a funding thing, so not counting you absence would be fraud.
Yes, ma'am.
But your absence is excused
That is correct.
and not held against you as part of the 90% requirement because it is
Yes,
an
ma'am.
excused absence.
Yes, ma'am. We're also under District of Innovation to have that discretion at the local attendance committee, and it would certainly be a medical condition where the school could waive it regardless, but we do not make those unexcused absences. They are excused for the student, and they're able to make up any and all work that was not able to be completed because of their quarantine,
Okay.
whether for close contact, for symptoms of, or for positive. It is an excused absence.
That's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
And related to the work,
Yes.
so last year, we had the option for kids to move to a virtual learning, to continue to do the things they're doing. That's not an option currently, but students can make up the work as they go.
So what we're thankful for is, one, that even before TEA provided Schoology statewide, this board approved the purchase of Schoology within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. That is still in place, and so teachers are still posting assignments and information in Schoology. So students who are quarantined, in particular those in grades 5 through 12 who have technology devices from the district, are able to continue getting assignments. Now, they might need additional instruction, and it might be that they're not ready to complete some of those assignments, or they might be able to. Some teachers are posting videos of instructional material and instruction that help explain the assignment. They are not required to do so, but they may also provide additional resources that help the student who is at home. And so they can continue with those courses to the extent they're able to until they're able to return and get tutoring or additional support to complete those assignments.
Okay, one other question. So when it comes to vaccinations,
Yes, ma'am.
we have no idea what percentage of our staff and students are
Correct.
vaccinated, correct?
Right, and we're not able to ask, in fact.
So do we have guesses as to what that is, or it
No,
would
ma'am.
just be a guess?
It would be the local health, the county, and how many in the county in those age ranges are vaccinated that they're reporting. That would be our only indication that would give us a
And
measure.
that number is very low.
Mr.
30%?
O'Neill, do you happen to know the vaccination?
Okay.
But we can look into that for you, ma'am.
Well, I was just, it's all related. We're offering these things, which is wonderful, but we don't really know how many are. And as I see big lines in some campuses for cases, it makes me wonder, we're
Percent of
encouraging masks. Are the campuses where we're seeing less cases? Do we have more staff and students wearing masks? I know that would just be a visual observation, but since we can't know anything about vaccination rates, again, trying to do the things that we know can help keep us safe.
One more point, going back to your earlier question about students who are at home. I think it's also important to note for students, they are not to take tests at home this year. Those will only be done on-site with the appropriate proctoring from an educator. And so when they return, they would take those assessments. So no need to take those while they're at home.
With regard to the protocols for the close contact for students, is that a hard and fast rule protocol, or is that, or do we have any flexibility with that? It does seem to me to be, and I'm sure some reasons for this, to have a different rule for staff and students. Kind of concerns me, of course, that we could easily have a infected student and really they don't have to do anything, apparently.
Well, if there's
My main
symptomatic,
question is that like something we have to do, or could we tighten that up if we wanted to?
there was some new guidance that came out recently from TEA. I will say we're seeking further clarification from TEA on their intentions with close contact students. It's really pertaining to students who are in a home with another positive individual, not just happen to have been around somebody maybe at an event and is considered a close contact that they're reporting. So there is some new language in the public health guidance for if you live with a positive individual, the district may have flexibility to require in that circumstance the student to quarantine. That's new and different and recently released, so we're still investigating that one. But it does not apply to general close contacts at events or at school or anywhere else. It's only those that live in the home with you.
But they're basically directing us to follow that rule as opposed to giving us choice?
No, sir, they're saying that's your choice for those who live in the home exclusively.
Well, if we live in the home, but the others, if it's not a live in the home situation, then.
TEA says it is the parent's choice.
Okay.
Yeah, and back to, Brian mentioned the clear communication. So I'm a
Yes.
parent. I've already gotten several of these saying,
Same.
yes, and so, even though I know things most people don't know perhaps, it's confusing.
It is.
What do you do? Were they exposed or not exposed? We don't know, and as long as my kid has remained asymptomatic,
Right.
I've continued to send him to school, but there's not, I know other parents who have said, well, my kid was exposed, so I need to keep him home. So it's just confusing.
It is, and we tried to, we want to make it where it's fair to everyone. So the exams, for example, the major grades, that was a key factor last year that we needed to make sure that we altered for this year. But just so you know, we've offered after school or Saturdays. So if that truly is an issue where coming back during the day is problematic, we can do that. We talked about all different forms of communication.
Yes.
And how would that be best to communicate to the parents? And I'm sitting in the same boat. So I'm getting, 3 sets of emails from my kids, and it's like, which one is it? How do we make sure it's only represented one time? It's not represented if they happen to have the kid 3 times in the class period, or 3 times during the day for the secondary campuses, that you get 3 emails and it's really for one student. And so our emails are a step above and beyond what the state has even asked us to do. In all honesty, just that COVID tracking graph is what we could leave up there for the parents to go, and that gives you really nothing. It tells you the campus and, the time, date, and that's it. It doesn't tell you if it even applies to your students. So even though it's not, down to the kid and where they're sitting and how close were they and all of maybe what we would want to know, it still is some information to be able to make a decision and to monitor your kid to say, are they symptomatic? Are they not? Can we start watching for stuff? Is this something that we need to pull them back from? And so,
Yeah, I don't mean to sound critical at all,
you're not.
but I can
agree.
understand why folks
I agree. Yes,
might
ma'am.
be confused. There are some who get that and think that's a close contact. And
It may not.
probably wasn't.
It very well could be. They're not. They could be sitting right next to one another, or they could be distant from the first to the very back of the classroom. It's not exactly as helpful as we want it to be. It's just impossible to try to get it down to that specificity.
But I do think it makes a good point to why the staff on campuses are so vigilant about offering masks to students so that you have more protection in each of these classrooms and these opportunities. If they're willing to wear a mask, it certainly would help.
I would even go back to the sneeze guards that we purchased back last school year, and that we've purchased again, that we've turned right back around, and if they needed to be repurchased, we've reordered. And so when you look in classrooms, not only do you have obviously masks, but you've got sneeze guards up, and we made those available to really anyone that wanted them. And so we've ordered
Ms.
quite a few.
Carabine has that in just a moment too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump
No,
in.
that's okay. It's all part of the same conversation.
So Barbara,
I apologize.
Is this our rule that we know the staff member is out and they've tested positive and they've got a lot going on? So is this what we're requiring, that they check in every 3 days?
This is
No,
for
they're gonna be
those
gone
who are
for 10
close
days.
contacts. So
Only for the close contact?
only for the close contacts. If you're positive, you must stay home for the full 10-day period from the date of symptom onset.
But if you're quarantining for the close contact?
This
then
is
you have to
quarantine
check
for
in.
close contact, and if you want to work, you can stay home and take days. But if you want to continue working and you're close contact, then you must produce rapid test results that are negative to continue coming to work. To help with that, I'm sorry. I know each week we get new and different information, just like last year. We just try to be as responsive as we can to it. But we're thankful again that we have HealthPoint as a partner, thanks to Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Besaw. With that, our employees can drive up and do the rapid testing so that it's convenient for them and easy for them, and then they can report to work. And again, if an individual, an employee, is a close contact and they're concerned, they are welcome to stay home and take days and stay home for the duration of the quarantine period. This is only if they want to continue coming to work. Certainly, if they have symptoms, they would be asked to stay home in quarantine, as we would all expect, and then certainly if positive, the rest of it would kick in.
So what do we do, Barbara, if we know there's a student in the classroom that is positive, and you've got 3 teachers out that are positive from this one student? Then what do we do with the rest of them? They'll continue to go to school?
Yes, ma'am. Per TEA, it is the parent's choice to
Parent's
quarantine the child.
Where?
Yes. Okay. So along with that, this was brought up earlier, but just as a reiteration, we are following the federal mandate that masks are required on public transportation, including school transportation. And our protocol has been in place since last year. The students load front to back and disembark or load back to front and disembark front to back so that they're not walking past each other. And then also the drivers are sanitizing the buses in between routes to help make sure they are clean. And obviously, just like we talked about before, the students are able to sanitize their hands upon boarding the bus. They must have a mask on. If they don't have one, we provide one to them. So any child who goes on public transportation for school buses or any of our transportation services rather is automatically given a bus before or given a mask before they come onto campus. So we're making sure every student who rides transportation has a mask before they enter the school building right out the door. So hopefully that helps encourage them to keep those masks on in our classrooms and keep themselves safe in the event that someone in their class is positive. And Ms. Carabine.
Thank you. We've mentioned a lot of new and different. Well, this is actually not new, not different, and actually not required. This is Bryan ISD going above and beyond as far as preventative measures and PPE. We have a litany of items that we continue to supply to our campuses, including sanitation stations. We've provided gloves, disinfectant wipes, Lysol, sneeze guard barriers, as Dr. Merrill mentioned. Some of the campuses had many remaining, but we've since replenished several thousand just to ensure that we had the same amount as we did last year. We've mentioned masks. We are strongly encouraging and requiring on our buses. And we went above and beyond also for our specialized supports, for example, providing face shields for our special education teachers and face masks that have a clear view window for our deaf education classrooms. And then we also continue teaching social distancing, especially in elementary, because this is new for them, and placing signage out to remind everyone to do so. And this is just a huge shout out for our custodial team last year, and they continue this year, sanitizing, again, our bus drivers between routes. Our custodians at each campus is disinfecting every classroom, restrooms, frequently touched surfaces, and they're disinfecting the cafeteria tables between lunches. They also continue to sanitize our classrooms and other areas should they be notified of a positive case or a suspected case. And then as you can see in the photo, this is our electrostatic disinfectant sprayer. Our custodians are trained to use these, and they're actually using them every Wednesday and Friday, just like we did last semester. We call it the Ghostbuster effect, but wildly popular for disinfecting. And then finally, regarding HVAC, this was a hot topic last year, so we continue to do what we did when the COVID-19 pandemic first began here, careful maintenance and frequent replacement of our HVAC filters. We've made adjustments across the district to include increasing operation hours for our HVAC. We are turning on the air conditioning before the staff members arrive, and we're running it to well after, just to increase air conditioning and the air circulation. And then finally, you may recall from our SACO upgrade project across the district, we have an additional measure taking place with HVAC with what we call bipolar ionization to the air handlers, which cleans the air return.
I haven't looked that up, but I suppose you're going to say that that's supposed to work with this virus. Is that right? Bipolar ionization?
Well, that's what they're saying. I I think as time went on, the companies were walking back their guarantees with that, but they were saying it was an added measure. Not a guarantee, but better than not having it.
Well, I have a more, I guess, controversial question. We have a lot of sneeze guards, right? Well, I have to say, there's a lot of pressure about the mask, and I don't know where we're going with the mask, but I would assume we're not necessarily violating the governor's order if we say, okay, if you're not going to wear a mask, you have to use the sneeze guard. Has that been considered? Has anybody talked about that?
We haven't had any concerns with that from any of our staff or students.
But I mean, has that actually been imposed on a student to say, if you're not going to wear a mask, then use one of these sneeze guards? And I can see where somebody might fuss about that, but I don't know that that's a legitimate gripe. That doesn't seem to be violating the governor's order, so.
Right. I think one could argue that it's not as invasive as putting something on your face and touching your body. These are sitting on a desk, somewhat removed. So far, we haven't had any complaints or concerns, and we use them quite frequently. And they're not one-to-one and on every single desk. They're strategically placed in the room to provide barriers and also leverage the distancing. So I would imagine if there was a student that felt that it was somewhat intrusive, that we could perhaps move them to a different table that didn't have one.
Well, my main point, though, is not just to offer it, but to require it. If you're not going to wear a mask, you will have to use the sneeze guard, whether the student wants to or not. Do you know if that's being done or considered, or is that part of our policy, yes or no? I mean, I'm just trying to understand. It seems to me that might help at least alleviate some fears if you have a student who refuses to wear a mask or doesn't want to wear a mask or whatever, even though they're encouraged and not required, well, then okay, we're going to at least have the sneeze guard for that student, not because they want it again, but because we're saying you have to. I realize that's kind of a significant step. That's why I use the word controversial.
I might be able to just shed a little light. Would you pop back to the slide prior again, the one that shows a lot of the sneeze guards? These are actually, affixed down on the desk. So they really are not something portable. Now, not to say that you couldn't probably find some that are, but these particular ones, like this is the Henderson cafeteria in the top, and this is a secondary science lab. But the child would literally have to be walking around with a piece of, it would be impractical going to eat lunch, going to the restroom, I don't know that it would be, it hasn't, actually hasn't come up, but I don't think it would be something we'd probably want to do because I don't think it's practical. Swinging on the swing and, out at reset.
Well,
Yeah.
Interestingly,
They do spend a lot of time in one place in the classroom. That's where
The good news here is that we have been, I think, very plentiful in giving these to the campuses. So for example, when I popped into Henderson on Friday, that they were preparing for lunches, and that's how that principal chose to use them. So that's a lot of protection as the children eat. So I think that the good news is that we're taking care of some of that without someone having to ask.
if I could just add to that, Dr. Hvac, something that you mentioned earlier. Last year at this time, we did discuss, okay, should each child be assigned a sneeze guard? So it's always with them, it's only theirs. And for all of the reasons that you just described, it was not done. But that's exactly why Mrs. Carabine has made it basically a 1-to-2 ratio. And so the likelihood of you having a sneeze guard at your desk is really very, very high at the elementary and intermediate level, and then even still into the middle school age ranges. At the high school, it's still there, but I will say there have been some students who don't necessarily care for it because it's harder to see across the room, and it can cause some issues with them participating as easily as they would like in the instruction. But at the younger grades, I think it's much more prevalent and useful in those moments.
Mr. Stasny, this isn't exactly your question, but it brought a thought to mind. We have had parents that have contacted us or the principals and asked for assistance with their students wearing masks, and we've provided that. So if they call us and say, hey, I want my kid to wear mask during the day, we send that communication out to the teachers to make sure that they're aware that the parent has asked it. So we haven't gotten a ton of those, but when we have, we're more than happy to take that into consideration.
One of the other things that just came to mind was, as a classroom teacher, there were about 3 areas where you really had power within that classroom. And traditionally, it was always an absolute power. And that would be, one, for example, would be the grade book. The other one was the seating chart, because with the seating chart, you can do a lot. And so has there been any discussion, because I think we're probably there on some campuses, of within a classroom, you have an area that if you're wearing a mask, these are reserved for your seats over here, or this is where you're sitting, and that can be dynamic. And here's to Mr. Stasny's point, these desks have sneeze guards. Now, I know that's more realistic on the secondary campus than the elementary campus, but we have a lot of sneeze guards on the elementary campus already within the workstations. But
We have not done that. We have not separated or put them in any parts of the room based on masks or not masks. We haven't done that. I will say, though, that the teachers are very strategic, as you pointed out. Those are two kind of lone places where they have autonomous control. And when you walk into a classroom, you will see them spread out all over the place, whereas 2 years ago, they would have maybe been in a more confined area. And so they're spread out into areas where, typically that would be maybe a small group instruction area or a reading nook or something like that. So they're spread out as far as they possibly can, but we have not separated them according to mask or not mask.
I will add, though, that I've received about, I would say 2 to 3 emails, because sometimes they have multiple suggestions or items within the email from parents asking about cohorting, which is a little bit different than, the side of the room that you're mentioning. But cohorting meaning that kids with masks travel in the same classes and kids without in the same classes. And the reason that we really aren't going down that path, although I think the team would be the first to tell you, nothing's off the table as we are on a journey that no one has ever been on before. And, but right now, looking at the number of people, for example, children are cohorted by the courses they take, but also by the level that they take. When a teacher pulls children, like you saw in the picture just a moment ago, to what we call a teacher table, that is most often done by their level of academic need or enrichment. It's not done but based on, right now, of course, a mask, but it's done based on the skills. And so it doesn't really work logistically to set up a system to move in that regard. But again, we never say never as we are going forward. But right now, when we have a 1 to 1.5% positivity rate, I think that we're staying away from that logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
We could end up with 35 kids in one class and 15 in another, and things like that cause other issues for teachers.
Yeah, master schedules work on for months, and altering that would be, it would be interesting to say the least. We would definitely do that. So I don't think anything is off the table, as Dr. Hvac said. So the preventative measures that we've talked about with visitors, we are allowing 2. We've encouraged just 2, limiting 2 per student. So if they're coming up to celebrate a birthday or to eat with their student, we are allowing them in at this point, and we do have an area where they're able to go off by themselves. And so all of our cafeterias are able to accommodate that fairly easily. And when they are coming in again, we do have masks available for parents. We let them know that they're available really, obviously, at any turn.
Bryan, do we have a threshold of when we're going to shut that down?
We've talked about a lot, but no, ma'am, we don't.
Okay.
We do not. At this point, I wouldn't say it's a problem. So, for example, on Friday and Thursday, we went around looking for, honestly, to get a picture for the presentation, and it was very difficult to find a parent that had come to school to eat with their child. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's just a lot less common than it was beforehand. So we didn't find one. We eventually found one, but we had to look pretty hard to get it done. Preventative measures for fine arts as well. When you look at this is kind of an ongoing thing as well. So, you start in one place, and then as the numbers have increased, you kind of reassess, and we've looked at it all over the place. So, to the extent possible, we're live streaming events and performances. We've been doing that, obviously, for graduations. We've been doing it wherever possible, and that's one of the great things about technology. As Dr. Ibarra said, obviously, when a student goes home, we're still able to facilitate their learning. And this is another way that technology can serve us. We're offering masks to students and visitors who attend events. We've done that really at every turn. You're going to hear that throughout this presentation. And where appropriate, we're providing spacing between seats. For example, if you've been to the black box at Bryan High, that's a very intimate setting. But you can spread it out as far as you possibly can to make sure that there's appropriate spacing and that they're maybe not right on top of one another. Clearly that, you have limited capacity at that point, and you saw it at the graduation that we had the other night. We limited the number of tickets for the winter graduation that we had, and that was well received, but obviously there weren't probably as many people would have been in attendance as we had in previous years because of that very reason, because of the limitation on tickets and the fact that we were streaming it. And then when possible, multiple performances to reduce the size of the audience. So, the kids don't ever mind sometimes performing 2 or 3 times, and if they've got an audience to perform it in front of, we definitely want to take advantage of that.
One of the other questions specifically around fine arts, because this is where I've seen it, is they're still having mandatory parent meetings without an option for Zoom or anything like that, but they're requiring the parents to come up to campus. It's after school, it's, usually in the evenings, but, that seems like another low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
That there's
Absolutely.
no reason for parents.
We can definitely talk to our fine arts directors about that. Mr. McCall, you bring up a great point. For example, that's like arts. So we've taken ARDS and we've taken that opportunity to make them virtual as well. So it falls right in line with that same thinking that where we can make it available. And what we find is a lot of parents, they want to come in, they still want to have the meeting, and then some of them they can't. They work, and it's just more opportunistic for them to stay at home and participate virtually, whereas in years past they might not have been able to. So that is low-hanging fruit for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill. I do want to add, I meet frequently with the Director of Fine Arts, Mr. Pat Corbett, and he's assessing this every single day, hoping that when we hit December, that's our biggest performance month, that things will level out. If not, we're going to pivot as needed, and I like your suggestion of making sure we offer virtual settings for parents, so we'll continue to visit all that. And with that, that brings us to field trips. We're trying to provide every opportunity for our students that we can in Bryan ISD, so we have put some measures in place to mitigate. You can see from the photos there, that was actually over the weekend, our orchestra students traveling to the orchestra, and they're all masked up. They're on the bus, very willing to comply with that. We have chaperones in tow with us. Lots of our parents helped us with this event, and they are completing the health questionnaire, and we're certainly imploring them to wear their mask, and sanitation is occurring on the buses, and PPE is amply available.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about school events. This has also been a moving target. So you start the year, and as the cases have progressed, unfortunately, we've communicated with the campus principals to push things at this point. So when appropriate and where we can, we have asked campuses to move events to later on in the year, not to just forego them altogether, but to plan for them not only maybe a few months where they would traditionally be done, or even to possibly look at maybe moving things outside. So all of those things have been considered, hopefully with enough runway where they can think about it, and when hopefully the numbers are down, we can either bring them back in or we can do something outside if necessary. So we are in constant communication, as we said, with the local health conditions, where as Ms. Carabine said, with their directors, we're in constant communication where they don't have a director necessarily, but they have a campus, a principal. We just take those kind of item by item to make sure that the climate or the cases would facilitate us having the event. So as you, Mr. McCall said, where possible, we do want to do on-campus and virtual. We want to make sure that we give those families the options, and what we found is that they're taking that option. They actually, in some cases, that's where they weren't able to attend, they're able to now. So as I've already shared, open houses have been postponed until after October 1st. That's just been communicated across the board. Pep rallies have been moved to outdoor locations. We tried to do one Friday at Bryan High. Unfortunately, the weather did not cooperate. I know the drill team was able to perform in a gym with limited seating and limited parents, but it was still great. As a parent of a Cheyenne, I got to watch my little girl dance, and so I was really excited about that. And they pivoted very, very quickly. Lane and his staff did an amazing job, and Rachel, next pep rally, will do the same. And so we have the live streaming for our performances, as we've already discussed.
So
How is Rudder handling their pep rallies?
So that's a difficult question. So we are not doing them in the gym. We have to figure out exactly how to do them, and it's not as easy as Bryan High. Merrill Green is obviously very close. There is not, the stadium will not hold us. The Rudder Stadium would not hold Rudder. So it creates a challenge. So at this point, we've not landed on exactly what we're going to do. We know that we don't want to put them in a gym, so we're just going to have to be creative. Last year, they did a virtual pep rally. That was great. I mean, it was great for the times. Having gone to the other pep rallies, they're not the same. Again, we don't want to create a super spreader event, so we don't want that, so that we have to take both those things into consideration to create some normalcy and at the same time not create a toxic situation. So it may be that we allow just certain grade levels to go out to the football stadium or something like that, but we'd have to make adjustments.
I know there was another high school, I think in North Texas, that went ahead and moved it to a pregame. And so they
That's a
did
good
like a
idea.
pregame pep rally, so
That's
everybody
good.
was already at the stadium,
That's
had
awesome.
already been bussed there, and then they televised it.
That's cool.
I feel really strongly these need to be outside.
Yeah. We have no plans to conduct one inside again.
Thank you.
So as we talk about staff and just making sure our staff are clear that if they're ill, we want them to stay home, right? There's an item later on the agenda for the board to consider and discuss about helping employees feel comfortable taking the time off when they are ill, especially those that are positive, and letting us know that they're positive. But we just want to make sure that it's clear that you need to stay home if you're sick. We also have our Bryan ISD Health Clinic that can provide quick assessments and also testing, as well as the Health Point partnership for rapid testing for those who believe they may be positive. As possible, we are holding virtual meetings for staff, trying again to be respectful of each of our employees and their wishes for being around others. And then, as we've already mentioned repeatedly, making sure the appropriate PPE supplies are available to all staff members. Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Besaw, Dr. Hvac, and the team continue to work with local health officials and other entities to make sure that, as much as possible, we're in alignment with the expectations across the county and the organizations, but knowing that whatever we can do above and beyond, we're certainly willing to. Any other questions?
Well, I'll just throw out one more thing that we talked about incentivizing attendance by staff. I would hope that just asking our staff to wear masks is working pretty well. My understanding is that most of them are wearing masks or not, majority, no, yes, you don't know?
I can tell you that based on going into campuses the first day of school and then as late as Friday, that I will tell you I see an increase in mask wearing, period, among children and adults. But to quantify it, it's very hard to do. But I do think that there's, in general, more wearing them. We have sent several communications to our staff asking. We've also talked both in person and through email to our principals, asking to strongly consider. But at the end of the day, it's, as you know, their choice.
Get to my main point, because I didn't mean to go off in the wrong direction here. I mean, obviously adults can, for the most part, they can get vaccinated. If they choose not to, they don't. They can wear masks. They're adults. They should do that if they want to protect themselves and others. And I'm just throwing this out because like everybody says, we're trying to find all kind of ways to make this work better in light of the governor's order and so on. I think it could work to incentivize mask wearing for the students, and if that hasn't been discussed, I mean, I'm assuming that's not in violation of the governor's order to incentivize, whether it's a little, if you wear a mask consistently for the week, your names get put for a drawing for something. It could be, certainly wouldn't be a very expensive deal if you did a little lottery kind of thing. I don't know what else you do, but that's not my job to do that, but I would at least wonder if that's been considered, and because you're trying to get these kids to do something. And another thought I had, which is probably a little less practical, is that really cool mask that everybody wants to wear, but I think I don't know if that's practical. But I would love to see a working incentive that would actually get students to be more, I'll wear a mask because I might get to win this, whatever it is. And that could even work for little kids if the prize was right, I guess. So that's just a thought. I know that sounds a little desperate, but we're sort of desperate.
And I think everything's on the table, and along that same lines, one thing that, back to secondary, I think is where this really works is, and it goes in line there, is have we thought about letting those that are wearing a mask out of class 5 minutes early to traverse the hallways during that 5 minutes? Because yes, it frees up and clears the hallway, but I guarantee you, a lot of secondary students, there's a lot more things they would do other than just wear a mask to get 5 minutes out early out of class. I mean, and I think to also kind of follow up with kind of the comments that have stated here, we can't mandate, but we can certainly incentivize, and I want to make sure that the principals understand and the leadership understand that, whatever we can do, to encourage people to wear a mask within the school setting, we're not going to challenge that as part of the board. I mean, anything that's, we want to certainly encourage, we have a strong tradition of really thinking outside of the box and doing things unique and different and trying some things, and if it doesn't work, try something else, kind of attitude here. And we certainly want to encourage our schools to feel like they're empowered to do what they can.
I think, Mark, and along that line, I would really like to encourage us to only be posting and promoting pictures of people that are wearing masks. I saw on the website and on our Facebook page, we had quite a few pictures of kids that were in there, and they were great pictures. But I think we need to use a little social psychology and begin that appearance that everyone is wearing a mask. And the more we show everyone is wearing a mask, then more and more people will be inclined to wear a mask. And I think if we could kind of pivot and shift those photographs that we are posting to only show teachers that are wearing a mask, only show students that are wearing a mask, then we start promoting the image that everyone at the school is wearing the mask.
Good conversation. Lots for the team to talk about.
We appreciate the guidance and the suggestions and the wisdom very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll move on to the virtual academy update.
That's me. Okay, so as you may know, the prior legislative session did not come to agreement on the virtual school options for public education, and it's currently prohibited from transpiring. However, under Special Session 2, a new bill was brought forward, or resurrected rather, Senate Bill 15. And Senate Bill 15 was passed by both the House and the Senate. That was fun. And is on its way to the governor for consideration. And so with that is the establishment of the option for a school district to open a virtual school. But there are some new and different stipulations than the last time we spoke. So let's go through just briefly what it is today. It does take effect immediately, and it would actually be retroactive. So districts that opened, even though it wasn't permissible, they would be able to count those students in the attendance. It does restrict that a school district may not enroll more than 10% of its enrollment in a virtual school setting, a full-time virtual school. So there is that limitation there. It does give the commissioner authority to change that percentage, but recent information from the commissioner does not indicate that that's on the table at this point. Along with that, there were some other requirements as part of Senate Bill 15. It prohibits teachers from being required to teach both remote and in-person students in the same class period. So nothing like what transpired last year. You have to be fully dedicated to an online class period or fully dedicated to an on-site class period, not both. Teachers may not be directly or indirectly, this is the exact language, coerced to agree to a teaching assignment on a full-time basis. So it needs to be teacher choice in terms of teaching remote instruction. And it does say full-time, so It's unclear at this point if the statute provisions would allow, one in the master schedule. Again, if a teacher agrees to it, I'm sure it would be permissible. But there are some provisions there that TEA is going to have to work out should the governor sign this bill.
So is this different than so SB 15, when it came up from the gentleman that presented it, before it had stated that just no teacher could teach both. And now
Yes.
they're doing it by period. So a teacher
Yes.
could teach an online class.
It's appearing
and
so.
then
It's
an
appearing so.
in-person, because that was not what was in the original.
Correct.
This is better.
Okay, this is better.
This is better.
I'm just skeptical when
There's
things are
just a
better.
little question there about full-time, so could we require a teacher or ask a teacher? We would always ask, but, what could we do to make sure those opportunities are available to students in the virtual setting? And
Okay.
then lastly, the commissioner is required to provide an accountability rating for students in a virtual school setting. So if it is not its own separate school number, then the enrollment for the students, wherever if they're all the different schools across the district, those students would be calculated in addition to on their home site and the virtual site. And the virtual site would have its own accountability rating along with the home campus where the student is also able to be served. So
That mathematically doesn't make sense. If it's only 10% of your kids and it's throughout your whole district, how would that even, you won't have any, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I think part of it is they really want to know how did it go, right? And they want to know because this statute sunsets September of 2023. And so previously, this was set to expire 5-6 years down the road. And they've restricted that window now to the next legislative session. So it could be reviewed then. And that would give them some data to understand how successful were virtual students as compared to on-site students during this time frame of a pandemic.
But 10% is not a representative sample.
Yes, ma'am.
It wouldn't be valid.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. They also have some new and different eligibility for students. So let me preface it first. When we talk about student eligibility here, the 3 bullet provisions that I'm going to go through only apply to those students who spent 50% or more of the school year virtual last school year. So if you were on site last year, TEA doesn't overlay this. It says the district has the discretion. So these 3 provisions are for those students who were virtual last year and want to be virtual this year. Student must have passed STAR in the previous grade level if it was applicable at that grade level, must have maintained a C or higher grade in all core content classes, must have been in good attendance and not had more than 10 unexcused absences in a 6-month period while attending virtual school. So the proposal here would be if the district moves forward with a virtual school setting, that we would consider those same provisions for students who were on campus in the prior year for eligibility into a virtual school setting, while still allowing a committee review for extenuating circumstances and conditions. Now, the provision basically says if you enroll them and they were a virtual school student and they don't meet these criteria, the district would not collect ADA for that particular child for the duration of the time they're in a virtual setting. So they've made it nice and clear, but we will certainly work on what that could be and look like if we go down the road. So right now, again, it's waiting to be signed by the governor. It is on the governor's desk. It went last week, and we anticipate that to be signed relatively soon and take immediate effect. So what we have before you today are considerations and how might we move forward if and when it's signed by the governor. Where would we prioritize our efforts to offer this to families who are interested and meet the entrance criteria the district establishes? So right now, our focus has actually shifted since the last time we all spoke. Because the vaccination is available for students who are 12 and older, we're seeing more parent requests for virtual setting for those students who are ineligible for a vaccination right now. And quite frankly, because of the provision of the teacher being on-site and or virtual, that not being an option, we have to hire a separate workforce to operate a virtual setting. There are concerns about appropriate staffing and being able to actually launch a school with enough staff to make it manageable and make it impactful for the students, right? So we are prioritizing right now our recommendation for discussion to kindergarten through 6th grade students.
Slide.
Did I do something?
Can you change the slide?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did it on my screen, but not y'all's. I apologize. In that situation, what we are proposing is that students would follow the daily schedule set by the school, the virtual school, and they would attend live classes. They would also have obviously asynchronous opportunities for some of these activities, but they would engage and participate with discussions and activities. It would not be asynchronous exclusively, and in fact, that would not count for attendance in the virtual school. So they would need to attend class live with their teacher. In terms of testing, whether it be state or local assessments, they would be on site, and we would have teachers available to proctor those on-site assessments. Obviously, with state assessments, it's required to be on site, but looking also at other assessments that those are also provided on site with supervision. Go ahead, I heard somebody. Okay. We are initially looking at parents committing for the remainder of the current semester if we go down this road, and then allowing them to continue through May if they wish to. But again, it's really going to depend on what the interest of families is out there and the eligibility of the students who are interested in attending. What we don't want to see is a student suffer academically for this choice. We want to make sure we're making the best educational decision and family decision in partnership with the parent. Staffing is ultimately determined by student interest, depending on what grade levels are interested and how many students. That particular piece really won't be known until we see how many parents are serious about their student being screened for entrance into this possibility. It does require under Senate Bill 15 that all of the teachers who provide instruction virtually are given direct instruction on how to do so. And so making sure there's quality professional learning all along the way, not just up front for these teachers to equip them to be skilled at providing virtual instruction to students. We are already having applicants apply. We posted the positions a few weeks ago and are pleased that we have applicants. It's a new kind of situation in that you obviously need a Texas teaching credential, but you may not live here. You may live in another state, but also hold a Texas credential. You could be a virtual instructor at the academy in that sense. And so that's making the opportunity more widely available to a larger number of individuals across the state and even across the country. And we do have applicants from all over that are interested in being considered for this potential opportunity. So that is part of what we're working on and looking at those applicants just to see, do we have a viable workforce and how many? Because that'll also tell us how many students we could possibly enroll that are eligible. So in terms of a possible timeline, and again, these are all just for discussion, we are ready to launch a survey of interest. And by interest, I mean specific to my child interest. I need your child's ID number. I need to know that you're looking at committing enrollment through December. We need to know for certain that you are serious about this opportunity if it becomes available. And then we need to look at the data on the students who are interested and see, do they meet the criteria? And how many would we need to hold committee meetings for to review for potential entrance if we move forward. Interviewing and screening the applicants, again, to see what the viable staff might be for this opportunity. And then bringing that back to the board for deeper discussion on September 20th of interest by students, viable applicants who could staff a virtual academy, and then discussing if that's the direction the board wishes to go based on the cost analysis, potential ESSER funding to be able to do this, as we previously explained with ESSER funding, that might be a possibility there. And then if that is the will of the board, then we would bring you a recommendation for a principal with this particular academy. And then again, these are very tentative dates, but quickly enrolling students and preparing educators to open the school as quickly as possible. The second 6 weeks begins the 28th. It may not be possible to open on that date. It is a natural grading period cycle, so it'd be nice to open on that date, but that may not be possible even if everything fell into place perfectly.
Do you have a minimum number that would need to opt in for this to be feasible?
It really depends on the number per grade level and the setting, for example, bilingual, monolingual, all of the different conditions. So no, ma'am, I don't yet, but I have options that I'll bring back on the 20th for you.
Well, it sounds like this is a very aggressive timeline,
Yes, ma'am.
which I applaud. Tell me more about why we're targeting these grades. So just from a developmental standpoint, I get that these kids can't be vaccinated.
Right.
But this probably wouldn't be my first choice to say we're going to target K through 6 for virtual learning.
Yeah.
And
Why?
initially, that was our exact idea as well, is that we were looking more at a 7 through 12 scenario. At this point in the semester, if we were to move to a high school opportunity, we do sort of have that in place already through MC Harris, where they can teach at a distance and they can learn at a distance. So there's already a viable option there. If a student sincerely wants to move that direction, we can help them with that. Additionally, if you start thinking about the GPA calculations and changing the semester and the school setting, it becomes problematic. And so the primary reason for K through 6, agreed completely, was not our original message, but based on parent feedback and interest on, we would like an option for our young child who's unable to be vaccinated. That's where, and that's not to say in subsequent months, years, and so forth, that we wouldn't extend to other grade levels. To start, this would be the motion.
So my primary question for a parent who's interested in enrolling their, and I'm sure this will be part of this interest application and review of student, but these are not kids who can be self-directed at home.
Yes, ma'am.
There has to be someone who's engaging with them and making sure that they're staying on track at home.
There would need to be someone partnering at home to make sure the child's attending class and doing the work outside of the live sessions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So then my concern is, Barbara, we're knocking that number down already.
Yes, ma'am.
When you look at last year, when we were at home virtual, look at the numbers we had last year. And you had parents that were there. My concern is, I'm concerned about those parents, and I understand where they're saying they don't want their kid in school because of this virus, but I don't want a child to be in this virtual academy in a spot just because the parent doesn't want the kid to go to school, but then the child is at home in the academy, but they're still lazy this year like they were last year. And someone else with a health issue or something needs to be in that spot. And I know there's a few that always get by all the time. The devil's always in the detail. But that's just my concern, is that it's actually going to be for kids that need it.
Ms. Benford, I couldn't
And that are
agree
in
more.
there, and not this, Fran doesn't want her kids in school or whatever reason.
Thrown in there.
Well, just for instance, but sometimes I know that happens. But in order for it to work, and then we're saying we're getting a grade for this,
I think I left out an important provision now that I'm hearing you, Mrs. Benford. There are 2 provisions I think will help with your concern, and I agree with them. One is the entrance criteria is set by the district. And so if it's not an academically stable student, we don't have to allow entrance into the virtual school setting. Secondly, even if we do allow entrance, if they're not performing to expectation, the district can return them to on-campus instruction. So they could be accepted on a 6 weeks time frame. Let's see how you do. And if you maintain your grades, you maintain your attendance in the synchronous sessions, then we'll continue. If you begin to struggle, you will need to return to on-campus instruction. So and I didn't mention that earlier, and I apologize. That's still a provision at the district's disposal.
I think one thing that we're going to need to be really clear as this hits the media and goes out, that this is not the option that you have tested positive and you go home and you go to the academy. This is, you have applied, you have been accepted, this is a separate school situation without a building. But if you are positive or quarantining or exposed, you are Schoolology opted, but not Academy opted. And I'm afraid that that's
That is going to
going to
be a
start getting the emails.
big communication issue. Yes, ma'am. That is exactly right. Students who are quarantining for any one of the three potential scenarios are not eligible to hop over, so to speak, to the virtual setting. They are going to stay enrolled in their course, and they're going to make up the work as they go. This is for a full-time virtual school for more than just a minute, more than just a 10-day time frame
For K through 6.
for K through 6.
Would that be a problem for a child to be temporarily as part of this academy?
Because of how you would have to shift them in master schedules and in Schoology courses, yes, sir, it would be and not the teacher of record grading would be an issue, yes, sir.
Maybe the better question is, are you confident that the kids that are going to be at home are going to get any kind of help that's anywhere near as good as the virtual academy? I guess that would be a better question.
Mr. Jasmine, you make a good point. And so it made me think of an idea that perhaps, depending on enrollment, I don't know that it's viable. If I could get back to you, and I have an idea, but I want to think it through just before we move on it. There are options out there for students who are at home right now. For example, Texas A&M has an Aggie Tutor program that's virtual. As the board knows, last year we tried one Enlightened before the A&M one launched, and didn't see a lot of attendance through that methodology. And trying to connect with parents who were at home doing virtual learning. But if you don't mind, let me look into it, sir.
I do think, I mean, obviously this is aggressive. I think there's a lot of, but I think there is a lot of work that went into this over the
Right.
summer and everything
Yes, sir.
else. So this isn't necessarily thrown together last week. I think there's a lot of things that we learned last year from an academic technology standpoint. And I would just caution as we rush through some of the stuff that we consider some of those lessons learned. And it can be as simple as having a standard Zoom background, right? So that, if you are teaching from home, it's still a professional environment that you're
Correct.
presenting to the kids. One of the other items that I would kind of throw in place, just because we have it at this point, is if we needed a location for, if there are local teachers and wanted to come to a spot to work, we have the Travis building there,
Very good point.
right? And as much as I would love to not have it there, it's there. And if we needed a house for this, where we can go through and give the teachers a home base, have a spot where the kids can come up to get tested, that's not a main campus environment.
True.
I certainly would like to leave that building. I'd like to see it used more than, just sitting there. As long as we have it. Now, if we sell it, we'll find somewhere else for them to go, but.
Do we have room, Dr. Hvac, at the Milam building? I know, whose house there?
We do have, we have our special ed department is housed at the Milam building right now.
Not much room there either.
There's a limited area of that building that's at the level that we want it to be. Some of that building is not really as usable without us spending a lot of money to get it up to par. But we're using the part that is available.
We are, and there's a section for storage for the district, and then also some future plans with a move for maintenance and transportation that are at play with a few of those areas. But the lion's share of it is utilized by special education services.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move down to the consent agenda.
I move approval of all the items listed on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Mrs. Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And we will quickly move into business services. Discuss and consider approval of group benefits risk pool.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. We have talked about changes in this area and this thing a couple of times in prior board meetings, but just to make sure and look at it or for one final time and make recommendations before we go forward. So we'll kind of briefly review the plan performance for 21. Actuary study that we did, we'll kind of review that. It's something that we do every 3 to 4 years to try to keep in line with what's out there and get a third option, a third set of eyes to look at our plan. And then look at the benefits of continuing a current plan and proposed plan design changes and premium increases to try to be sure that our plan is a healthy, viable plan going forward. The plan performance in 2021, it's no surprise with COVID and the things that were out there, it was pretty heavy usage based on that. We also had several high-cost claimants, and that took its toll on the plan as well. COVID testing, vaccinations, treatments was roughly 3.3 million. Expenditures through July of 21, that's the most current data we had. We will have ESSER funding to reimburse for that, so that's a very good thing that we have available. High-cost claimants, there were 7, which is a claim that reached the $325,000 stop-loss limit. Previous high that I'm aware of, and I think Mr. O'Neill said as well, was 4. So you can see the kind of impact some of these things had on the plan for this year. Medical inflation is averaging around 10% per year, so we have to kind of work that in, be aware of that. To shore up and cover some of the shortfall, we did transfer $3 million from fund balance reserves, and that was done with a budget amendment back in August before year end. And if we look at that, that equates to an additional $1,153 per employee. So actually increased the district contribution for that year from $450 to $546 per month per employee. So that is the end result. When there is a shortfall, the general fund has to, by law, make that up. So that's where we were at the end of August in 21. This is some information from the actuary, and one of the things they pointed out as they looked at it is a disparity between the premium and costs as to what level of insurance people have and what level of claims they have. So you can see on the top chart there, the average premium for Platinum, for example, basically for every $1 of premium that was charged on Platinum, there was $2.35 of claim. And then Gold, you go down that one, so for every $1 of premium that was collected, there was $1.40 paid in claims. And then the high cost deductible, or the high deductible plans, you can see for every $1 there were 73 cents paid out. So we kind of keep those things in mind as we look at changes and you know what we need to look at going forward to try to equalize some of these things. The bottom chart basically shows the same thing, only it breaks it down by employee only, spouse, and then child coverage. And so you can see again the changes there as claims to premium ratio. Benefits of continuing the plan, we do have we feel a very good plan. Employees very satisfied with the benefits, options available to them. We have that in our surveys and different feedback that we've gotten. When I talked to the Administration Institute, several people came forward and said that they would very much like to see our plan go forward because they've come from other districts and they did not have the benefits that we offer, or the cost was a lot more. And again, our premiums are much lower than some other options. You can look at, for example, the closest comparison we would have to our Gold family coverage would be on TRS. Active care would be approximately $600 a month higher. And that's before any changes as we make going forward. Another benefit we have is the Employee Health Center, which the employees utilize that a great deal and are very very happy with that as an option to go even before work sometimes just to get checked out. Some of the proposed changes, as we've talked through this, we're looking at a combination of plan design changes, the increased district contribution, as well as employee premium increases. So we're trying to spread it over all three possibilities, minimize the effect on any one area or any one group as best we can. Deductible increases for platinum and gold plan, no increase in the high deductible. Some co-insurance increases on the gold plan, and then out-of-pocket maximum increases for platinum and gold plan. And again, no increase for the high deductible plan. And they're trying to obviously move people, if we can, to the better, more effective cost options for the plan. And continuing the proposed changes, increase the district contribution by $10 a month per employee, so we would go to from $450 to $460 per month. Increase the gold tier premiums, and that would range from $6 for employee-only coverage up to $37 for employee family, and that's on a per month basis. And then increase the platinum tier premiums, and that would range from $14 per month employee only to $63 for employee family per month increase. And I would point out the gold coverage, that is our highest usage tier, and it has over half of our employees on that at this time. And when you look at the one that would have the highest increase in the employee family platinum, there's roughly 37 employees that would be on that family coverage for platinum. So you're trying to minimize the effect of that to the employees as much as we can. And then again, no change on premiums for the high deductible tier plans at this point.
Do we know, it may be a little early to ask this, but do we know how much of the claims proportionally are spouse and children as opposed to the employee? Is that out of proportion in terms of claims versus the employee claims? I don't. That's probably not making a lot of sense. I've always been concerned about pricing spouses and families in particular, or children out of the plans because of the amount that especially our lower paid employees are having to pay to get their families insured. It's a lot of money, and of course had the same discussion in prior years where got $6 increase for employee only and $37 for employee family. And yes, I understand that that's just a straight percentage, but we're already, of course, heavily subsidizing, and that all goes, or a lot of that goes, of course, to the benefit of the employee, and so that's why the employee has such a low premium right now, and will stay low under the gold plan in particular. But since you apply that same percentage increase to employee family, for instance, it's obviously 6 times as much, and so that difficulty in trying to include your family for that lower level employee, lower paid employee, is just becoming increasingly difficult. I realize that's what almost everybody does. A&M certainly is kind of the exception. They do pay more for the families than they do for just the employee, for instance. And Ronnie knows I've had this discussion before. So I was just trying to get a sense if it's a little easier to swallow, I guess, if you said, well, it just looks like at the data, it's the spouses and the children that are making the majority of the claims or whatever, not the employees, or is it kind of just spread in a normal fashion? That's a very long question. Maybe you can try to address my concerns, because my main concern obviously is pricing coverage in such a way that they're just going to discontinue insuring the family, which I would hate to see.
Yeah, and I can let Mr. Ronnie O'Neill elaborate on that a little bit if he wants to. And we also have Mr. Todd and Ross Gunnels here from ANCO who've looked at the plan with us over that period of time. But yeah, and you're correct. That's how a lot of districts or businesses do, and these would all kind of keep us in level with the market for those kind of claims. But Ronnie, do you have any?
To address your question about claims cost, I would say that it is spread fairly across the board. When you look at the 7 high-cost claimants that we had, probably about 4 of them were employee only. So I don't see how we can not increase all the tiers equally and be fair. Plus, if we don't, our employee-only tiers are going to become less competitive with other districts too if we raise them too much.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, we have in past years, we have raised the employee-only a bigger percentage to try to minimize that on the other tiers with employee, spouse, and child and family, et cetera. But I mean, at some point, when we're looking at putting $3 million in of general fund, we have to try to, I don't know if equalize is the right term, but try to spread that accordingly to the amount of usage that we have as well, which is kind of what the charts that the actuary came out with and showed. Of course, the platinum is the Cadillac version. So you would expect to pay a little more for that. And then when you have, the employee and then of course spouse, child, it's greater usage. So you have to kind of spread the premiums and costs over the groups that utilize the most, I believe, at some point. I think we have held those down in past years, but I think we've just kind of come to a point now where we have to make some adjustment in that regard. We have also gone and looked, I think I have one example, and that's basically just a teacher example of how the premiums would affect that. But we have looked at each and every employee group and tier, and I believe we can say that there's not any group or any pay level that would lose ground using these numbers. And I think the board approved at the last meeting moving the lowest paid groups from starting at $10 an hour to $10.50 an hour, which helps with that as well. So, I mean, we have made some strides in that area to try to accommodate this move. But
Kevin, I just want to thank you for doing things like this, where you show us the data on how this impacts different groups of employees. But I think for me, the thing I heard is that we have to do something to correct the continued deficit. Failure to do that means that we will not have a viable plan because we can't keep pulling from our own account to cover what our employees are using.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
yes, ma'am.
And we will not always have ESSER funds there to fill in that void as we've had this year, which has been, obviously helpful. I also just want to point out in each thing that Mr. Besaw showed you, for example, Gold, which is our most popular, the most amount of employees use that one, ranges from 6 to 37 a month. We do assess everything in bi-monthly, so it's really going to be $3 to like $18.50 a paycheck. So, because that's really how they think of it, is by paycheck, even though we tend to think of it as monthly. But I want to just commend the board, though, because in the last years, as we have had these conversations, you all have done everything in your power, and I think our team has as well, to keep the cost off the employee and to absorb more and more as a district. More and more that each time we come to this table, we've added more. Sometimes in our own meetings, Ronnie gets nervous because we all, the actuaries will recommend that we do more, that the employees pay more. But yet that's not been the mindset. The mindset's been to take care of the employees. And so we are still so much better off than if we had the teacher retirement system. It's unbelievable what employees are paying across the state with TRS. So I just commend you, and I think at least they found a balance between a little bit of a change in the actual benefit a little bit of change in how much the district contributes and the employee. So it's a trifold kind of effect, and I think that's the best that we probably can do, knowing the state that our nation's in with insurance. And most people that you talk to that are not educators will share stories about how it's affecting their own businesses and their own employees. So I commend you for everything that you've done and our team has done. I just don't know that we have much choice, but at least some increase.
No doubt that we've got an increase. I was just concerned about the, how much the increase in dollars is going to go to the ones that are trying to insure their families. And that was my only concern about whether there was any way to consider, I guess, reducing that somewhat and then absorbing that amount in some other manner. Either we add another dollar or two to what the district pays, or you'd have to obviously move more to the employee. And I think, Kevin, you answered the question that we've tried to do that some in the past. I'm certainly not going to follow my sword on this issue, but I just think we need to be sensitive to that it is of great value that we have employees with families, and it's of great value that our employees feel the comfort of knowing that their family's insured if they're not able to get insurance elsewhere. And so I think it's of great value. And if you look at the raw numbers, it's costed a lot of money for the gold plan family compared to, of course, what our employees pay for employee only. And that's understandable. It is understandable, but it's frustrating, very frustrating to me to see how hard that's got to be for some family.
I move approval of the group benefits risk pool plan design changes and employee medical plan premium recommendations for 2022 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Dr. Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next, we'll move into a discussion on the resolution regarding the extension of employee leave provisions.
Is this also on for closed?
Yes.
This is
They're
just,
going to present, and then we'll have a discussion in a closed session.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just going to try to lay out the basics or the high level of this and let y'all discuss it as you will. The reason bringing the resolution COVID or extended COVID leave forward at this time is, really to try to make sure that our employees feel like they can go get tested, and they could, if they do test positive, that they could be home. They would have extended leave to use in that case, so not using their own days, or if they were out of days, not getting docked at that time. It would be for a maximum of 10 days, and this is similar to one part of the FFCRA leave that you remember we had last year. But this would only be for employees who test positive for COVID-19. And of course, the goal is to encourage staff with COVID-19 to go test and stay home if you're positive instead of just feeling well. I feel a little bit sick, but maybe not too sick, so I don't want to use my days. I'm going to go to work today, and then through that, spreading that. This would hopefully limit the number of sick staff that comes to work and slow the spread of the COVID-19. The proposed resolution would make it retroactive to July 1st, which is basically the contract start date for the new year for a large group of employees. And this would be independent of last year's use for leave days. As we said, it's similar to the FFCRA leave, or at least that one part, but it would not be dependent on that. So it would not matter whether you used 10 days last year or not.
excuse me, Mr. Beaslaw, don't you have a bulleted slide
Well, sorry.
that would help
Well,
with, thank
Of
you.
course he
Yes.
does.
Sure.
That would help, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Yes, so I'm just going through those those examples, and really it's just we want to show that we value our employees to keep them safe at this point. And I believe you have a copy of the resolution to review, but that's the high points of it.
I've got it for closed session.
Yeah.
I think it's attached to the closed
it's
session,
on here.
sir. But essentially, the 10 days for COVID positive testing, and just the goal to try to keep our staff healthy and keep the most people in the building for instructional purposes as we can.
Again, we'll reserve any public conversation or discussion and item for the motion after we convene from closed session.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next we'll move into teaching and learning, discussion of purchase for Cardnex. Which I'll be honest with you, the first time I read this and proofing the agenda, I said, didn't we just do
I thought we
this?
just did
that?
this.
You've stolen my thunder, Mr. McCall. That was how I was going to start. Thanks for letting me be here today. And it was less than a year that I was before you asking for the initial purchase of Cardonics. It is actually now time to renew as we plan for the next year already. It's crazy, 3 weeks in and we're already planning for next year. Just a refresher, Cardonics is that master schedule program that we use to assist us with building the master schedule. And at the same time, it also helps us with staffing allocations. The goal with Cardonics is to build the best possible schedule, including what are the requirements for graduation or at any given level, what are the things that students are interested in taking, and then marrying that with your staffing allocations for your building. The goal is to build balanced, even classes, not periods where there's 29 in a class and 29, and then the next period there's 13. The philosophy as you build through with the presets, the singleton, the doubletons, is to keep things level. Last spring, a number of campus staff, along with myself, we went through training virtually with Cardonics, and we used that to help us build throughout the spring. It did aid us in a number of staff reductions at intermediate through high school. But of course, then House Bill 4545 happened, and we kind of threw it all up in the air and had to make some adjustments at the end just because of the changes of that. I thought it went well. I feel like as we use it this year, there were a whole lot of, oh, wow, I wish I'd have known that. As we went through and worked through the program, we really learned a lot. I do feel like it helped us tremendously, but I feel like it would be this upcoming year that would really, now that everybody involved knows how to use it, that it would be that much better. There is a reduction in cost from year 1 to year 2. We will still have training, but the amount of training would not be as significant as it was this past spring. And so I'm just asking for your consideration, and then hopefully we would be able to move this forward to the consent later this month.
So the staff that used it had the training, how did they feel about it?
I worked really closely with a couple of campuses. I worked really closely with Dublin. I worked really close with Bryan High. Ms. Lujan, the associate principal at Bryan High, is the one that is in charge of building the master schedule at Bryan High. And she is 150% on board because she realized every time we did something, she's like, oh, Donna, next time we need to do X, Y, and Z, and that'll make this work even better. So, but I can tell you it varied from campus to campus, and a lot of it was about just really taking that information from the training and utilizing it in the best possible way.
Did we need a motion? I didn't see the motion.
No, there's not a motion, but yeah, I would expect it to take more than 1 year before it really starts becoming effective, and certainly probably upwards to 2 or 3 before we start really getting efficient at it. But I'm glad to see that it was, well, we're glad to hear Well, it was received.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. The board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by Texas Government Code Chapter 551.071, 551.072, and 551.074. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. It is now 1:35. board reconvened in open session at 2:44. No action was taken in closed session. We'll entertain two motions at this time.
I move approval of the attached resolution regarding the extension of employee provisions related to COVID-19 as presented.
Second.
Okay, have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Mrs. Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I move that the Board of Trustees name Ginger Carabine as interim superintendent to be effective upon the vacancy of the superintendent position by Dr. Hvac.
Second.
Second. Have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Mrs. Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And on that last issue, that is pending, assuming that everything goes well as we expect.
Which is
With
still
Fort
up in the
Bend.
air.
Which is still up in the air, so, but
They might change their mind.
if they do change their mind, then we'll just continue as if nothing happened, and this was just a little speed bump.
She owes everybody lunch and
But
dinner.
just because this is such an odd time of year, and at the very beginning of the year, we want to just go ahead and rename the interim in order to facilitate that smooth transition for everybody, being the time of year and the delicacy of what's all going on within the school at this point in time. All right.
And she'll do great.
So if there's no other business or information, we are adjourned.
Thank you.